Don't ask me how you should track food when you're eating out. Do you want to track food when you're eating out? No. Do you want to be eating out 5 nights a week? Also, no. So like, what do you actually want? And when you get to the core of it, people are like, yeah, I would love to be cooking meals at home, not tracking food all the time. And I would love to just go out to eat once or twice a week and just enjoy it.
Let's link up with Krista on the Fix. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
What's happening, Fix listeners? Welcome back to our latest episode of the Fix podcast. As always, I'm your host, Krista Huber. I've got a great guest for everybody today, a name you will recognize as this is time number 2 for his appearance on the show. And that's my good friend, fellow nutrition coach, online fitness coach, Adam Badger. Adam is just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to fitness and nutrition, but more specifically inside of that, when it comes to understanding habits and connecting those habits to our levels of consciousness, to our thought patterns, to the fact that, as you'll hear us discuss, we are living in a world, in a time today where we are doing way too many things on autopilot. We are outsourcing way too much of our conviction, our instinct, our power to all the information that is so widely accessible to us on social media. We get into a great conversation about the yin and the yang between masculine and feminine energy. Adam throws in a few dating tips for any of my listeners out there that I think are also really relationship tips. So if you're married and in a committed relationship or seriously dating somebody, whatever, things to take with you no matter where you are in your relational journey. Because as you'll hear me say, at the end of the day, everything is relationship. Your relationship to food, your relationship to other people, your relationship to your work. And we really talk about these elements of shoulda, woulda, coulda, and the fact that so many of us are operating from this place that is kind of making you feel empty inside. And it's because you're doing things because you believe from societal standards, from stories you tell yourself, from whatever external, you think that you have to do that thing. And it could be as magnifying as a decision of like a specific relationship, a timeline for having children, having a job, whatever it is, like a specific career path that doesn't let you up. But let's bring it back down to day-to-day choices and decisions like food, like nutrition, like thinking that you quote unquote have to track your food just because everyone, myself included, is telling you it's a great way to lose body fat. You don't. The beauty of working with nutrition coaches like myself and Coach Alyssa inside of the Fitness Fix, the beauty of working with somebody like Adam is that, as you'll hear him say, what makes Adam who he is and what I believe makes a great coach, an exceptional coach, is being a good listener and actually hearing someone for what they're saying about the problems that are coming up for them, about the beliefs that they're carrying that are now creating these roadblocks that they're experiencing in their life. And I love podcasting for the reminder of being a good listener, because you even hear me cut Adam off a couple of times because I get so excited when we talk about these topics and when there's so much alignment of like, damn, I'm also doing this work in my own life. I've seen how this work has changed my energy, my thought process, my position, my ability to be more present. And then ultimately the way I connect with clients, the way I've grown our second business inside of the new marketing business I launched back in January, and everything kind of going on over there too. It's just like, yes, there are more people on this same mission, and it's helping us be happier versions of ourselves. So we get into all of that. We also get into the nuances of like what makes nutrition and fat loss tricky, in the sense that like we're all looking for trade-offs in a headspace of, well, if I give up X, then I should immediately get Y, i.e., if I give up going out to eat on Friday nights, then I should immediately lose 5 pounds within the next month. And for as much as I would like to tell you that I want it to work that way, for as much as Adam would like to tell you that he wants it to work that way, it doesn't, because there's other factors that we have to consider. That if you want to lose those 5 pounds, well, what do the other days of the week look like? Are you consuming the right amount of protein? Are you getting good sleep? Are you consistently going for walks? Are you getting good sunshine? Are you managing your stress? It all fits together. And if you're of the party that's saying that feels overwhelming, this is why it's important to work with coaches who are going to help you, as we kind of poked fun at, give you the system, and the blueprint and the playbook, but give you the playbook that's malleable, the playbook that can be modified and adjusted to fit exactly where you are in your life. That's why the Fitness Fix is a forever solution. That's why the Fitness Fix is a solution oriented around something you can do for a lifetime, because we want to be your final destination. We want to be the last nutrition coach that you hire. And I know I speak for Adam too, inside of his community, and the fact that we have a lot of crossover with the type of individual that we work with. And a lot of you are go-getter, high-achieving, powerful individuals who are so smart and so capable and so intelligent. And sometimes, as you'll hear Adam share through an example with one of his clients, what you're actually looking for is for somebody to pat you on the back and be like, I fucking see the work that you are doing. Let me help you. Let me be there to applaud you for your effort, but then also be there to pick up whatever other thing is imbalanced for you, such as your inability to focus on what food's going on in your plate, your inability to focus on taking care of your nutrition and giving you the structure that you need to feel good about putting yourself first. And know that when you then feel good about putting yourself first, you're able to show up as the best version of you in every single capacity of your life. So with that, I'll step off my soapbox and you'll hear me and Adam dive into more of this all very passionately. You'll hear by the end of this conversation, we are scheduling a part 3 because I could truly talk to Adam for hours. We had an entire hour-long deep dive into business and nutrition and marketing strategies before we even hit record on this podcast episode. So maybe we'll kind of do some version of that I'll release to all of my fellow coaches out there who are looking for the inside scoop on some of the marketing strategies that I've been sharing inside of my new content program called the Clarity Collective. So shoot me a DM if you're a coach listening out there and you want access to that. Happy to share it before I take it broadly to the rest of the internet. But for all of my fellow fat loss people out there who are here for the fitness trip tips and the nutrition tricks, I almost combined those 2 words. We got you. And with that, let's welcome Adam back to the FYX podcast. Adam, welcome back to the FYX podcast. As I said to you, you're only one of 2 people that I could say welcome back to the show. So, you're in good company with returning to this audience, everything we do here. I'm really close to 200 episodes. I think you'll be like episode 197. So we're like right in
nice.
there. So I'm very excited to hit that milestone mark at this for 5 years, and lucky that I have so many great people in my network that it's not like I need a repeat guest per se, but you and I always have so much to talk about. We literally chatted for like an hour before we started recording this. Yeah. And so I wanted to have the opportunity to bring you back on. For the listener, we will link the first episode that Adam and I did. Pretty much it'll be like exactly a year by the time we publish this, which is kind of cool because we had our episode last April. Down in the show notes, you can listen to it. You don't need to listen to these in order, but of course, it's always nice to kind of get some more of the background and some of the things we talked about. As a very brief recap, that first episode that you and I did was all about having like that really strong why and the emotional connection to your fitness journey, to your fat loss goals. And, like I said to you, I just loved that perspective coming from a guy, especially representing the men out there, reminding people that like there's this balance between the masculine and feminine, going to therapy, being in touch with all of the things. Like this is what makes me have hope out there too, as a single female as well. So I appreciate you for representing all of that. And, I kind of wanted to bring some of that back into the fold and back into this conversation today. But as a little fun exercise, before we dive into some of the things we already planned to discuss, from being on the show, I kick things off the same way every single time. And it's asking this question of like, forget all of your initials and certifications and titles that could go at the end of your name. Forget how many people you've coached and helped, but answering this question of like, who is Adam at your core? And I want to ask you this again, because I don't remember what you said a year ago, and I don't know if you do, but I think it'll be fun to see if you have a different response, because you've now had baby number 2. you're dadding it up all day long, right? And like things in your life have changed, perspectives have shifts, like you grow as a person. So I'm wondering for you, asking this again, and then we'll run the tape and we'll play it back and see if you had the same or a different answer as kind of like a cool exercise, like I said. But go for it. Like, who is Adam Badger at his core? Like, why should somebody listen to the rest of this conversation?
At my core, which is a tough question, I feel like if we're talking about why people should listen to me or get value from what I say, is I feel like ever since I was a kid, I always kind of looked at the world slightly different. And I feel like I don't just take things at surface level. I'm always like kind of inquisitive about stuff and ask questions, whether it's internally or externally. I just have a genuine interest in like why things are the way that they are. And I feel like I can spot bullshit very easily. Um, and
I would agree.
and so I think nowadays there's so much bullshit out there, and
Oh my God. Yeah.
but not in like the way that people talk about like, oh, there's so much bullshit out there, like everyone. But I mean, it's so much that now the bullshit has become what people perceive as real. So we're living in a
Mm,
world where we're just operating off of bullshit, not knowing that it's bullshit.
yeah.
And
Very meta of you.
yeah. So I feel like for me, I don't like the bullshit, and I'm willing to tell people when I think things are not true, or have just what I feel is very rare nowadays is just have an open and honest conversation where I'm genuinely interested in what the other person's saying. And I
Mm,
think as a coach, as someone who gives advice to people for a living, that can be very, very useful because I'm not giving advice based off, hey, I read this in a book or heard this on a podcast. It's just like direct, based on your situation, this is what I think would work, and this is all the other stuff that you probably shouldn't pay attention to.
yeah, so valuable. I want to say I can't quote myself on this. I feel like you gave a slightly similar answer because now that you're saying it
Probably.
about like the bullshit meter, I'm like I think that was included in there. So we'll go back and we'll listen for sure. But just to keep with the thread of the last point you made of the ability and skill set to be able to listen and take from life experiences and also what somebody's saying to you. I just want to back that up and attest to that as somebody who watches your content, interacts with you, has been on your podcast as well. I said to you when we were chatting before we hit record, I was like, oh, we should talk about like in person collaborations that you can do. And I literally said to you, the reason why you're good at that sort of thing is because you're the type of person and you give off this energy even through the computer who, if I have a conversation with you and I tell you something like my dog Bean, she was sick a couple months ago, which is a true story. She's better now though. You'll remember that. And you'll be like, yeah, remember when you told me when your dog was sick and you were up all hours of the night? Like, you'll remember that 6 months from now. And
Yeah.
that is such an important skill for just being a good person. And like the fact that we even have to call it a skill is probably a little bit sad, but also a testament to the fact of like the world that we live in with all this bullshit, like you're saying, right?
Hmm.
So, obviously react to whatever I just said and chime in if you
Yeah.
would like
I
to.
feel like I feel like the bullshit conversation is just to clarify by what I mean by that. I don't mean it in the way that, oh man, people are saying that carbs are bad, but everyone knows carbs aren't
Right.
bad sort of way. I mean
Yeah.
just like we live in a world now where, and I don't know if I talked about this somewhere. I think it was on a post where attention is currency.
Yeah.
So if you gather enough attention, which
Mhm.
by the way, you can pay for, right? So you can buy, if you have a lot of money, you can
Facts.
buy ad space, you can buy
Right.
the ability to get in front of more people through social media. Now there's like this small percentage of people in each field of life, whether it's relationship coaching, fitness coaching, business coaching, right? There's a small group in each sect that has the lion's share of the attention. And when you have the
Mhm.
lion's share of the attention, whatever messaging you're putting across or perception you're giving off becomes the narrative. And then when that's the narrative, everyone who's not in line with that looks like they're either being a hater or there's a lower or a higher trust barrier. So for example,
Yeah.
if the most popular people in the fitness or nutrition space are saying that, these ingredients are going to kill you, and then someone like me says, "Oh, no, they're not." To the average person, they're like, what Adam's saying it sounds like it makes sense, but it's hard to believe that when these people have millions of followers and millions of eyes on them are saying the opposite thing. And I feel like this has kind of gotten into all areas of life. And
Yeah.
I don't want to say victim to it because I hate the word victim, but I was
No.
guilty of buy into that. And I was at a place a couple of years ago or even a few months ago, where I was over consuming information on any topic that I was interested in improving in my life. And it
Hmm.
turned into like this process of you are unintentionally putting yourself in a victim mindset. Because a victim mindset doesn't mean you're feeling sorry for yourself. A victim mindset means you think you can't solve your own problems. So I was giving up all of my authority to anyone I thought was doing better in areas of life than I was.
Yeah.
And it was affecting how I was showing up as a dad,
Wow.
how I was showing up as a coach, how I was showing up as a husband. Because I was constantly, already an overly analytical person. So every decision I made, every conversation I had, every day of my life was consumed with over analyzing everything that happened throughout the day, which led to just being on autopilot all day and never actually truly being
Mm,
present in my life.
sure.
And I think from working with a lot of clients, especially people who are very busy, that is how they're living, is they're just kind of on autopilot
A
and they're
million
not,
percent.
yeah. So based on what you're saying is I got to a place where I was ignoring my own instincts and who I am naturally as a person because I used to be someone who was, for better or worse, feet dug in the sand. This is how I see life, and no one can change my
Yeah.
mind. And then somewhere along the way, um, I gave up that authority and started just conforming to what I thought I should be. And it led to a lot of internal discomfort, a lot of unhappiness, and all the good things in my life that I got because I showed up as myself were now not going well because didn't know how to be myself anymore. And it was kind of like this identity crisis that I was going through.
Oh, well, I'm obsessed with what you're saying because that is really actually how I feel about content. We were
Mhm.
spending a while before we started the episode talking about like content strategy and approach with lead generation. And something I have been telling all of my clients inside of my content coaching program is that content is about energy. And I kind of came up with this like go to strategy, if you will, where I say content is more about soul than it is about strategy. And
Mhm.
the reason why I'm saying like I'm obsessed with what you're saying is because the behavior that you just described and attributed to the pattern you also see with your clients, it is how we're living to the point where you start outsourcing your power to other people. And that
Mhm.
is so dangerous because it
Oh
makes
yeah.
you second guess yourself. Like you said, I really appreciate the fact that you mentioned like you're not just talking about business and content creation, you're also talking about how you showed up as a dad, as a partner, because we have too much access to information to the point where that's putting us in a position where we're all like, okay, wait a second, like what am I supposed to actually be thinking here? Right.
Yeah, you
And
don't even know if you're supposed to, like, your thought patterns are now what's going on inside your head is now not even you're giving that up to someone.
really not yours. Like that is
Yeah.
so dangerous and but it's so true and I don't think we're talking about it enough. And I tell my clients in the coaching like the content coaching space this point because whenever someone comes to me, like 9 times out of 10 if they tell me I don't have content ideas, I'm like, tell me what your schedule has been like for the last month. And here's what's missing. They haven't gone anywhere. They haven't changed their environment. They've been glued behind their computer. They've been focusing on creating something new. And if I get into the nitty gritty, like really granular aspects of their day, they tell me that most of their creation process starts with them scrolling for inspiration.
Yeah.
That's where you just lost it. It's because
Well,
like you're
let me ask, do you mind if I ask you a
okay,
question? So
sure.
right now, but people who are listening to this, would you say they're mostly other coaches or they're mostly people who are like more interested in like fitness, weight loss, or is it a
It's a
mix?
mix. So
Yeah, because
like what I've been doing is like really kind of talking about this. Like this episode is kind of perfectly timed because this past week, it'll come out, we're recording this a couple days in advance. So it'll come out, you'll be able to hear it afterwards. But I just did this episode for this Thursday where I basically talked about how to use AI for fitness and nutrition questions, but in the context of like also how to think about it as both a consumer and as a coach. So like kind of hitting both of these audiences and saying that, at the end of the day, the reason why it's easy for me to talk about it from this angle of like fellow people listening to this who are also entrepreneurs, but also people listening to this looking to lose body fat. Guess what? There's crossover because a lot of the same hangups that you have with where you're getting stuck on your fat loss journey, if you're a business owner, if you're a content creator, they are legit parallel to that. So I like to kind of use a lot of these analogies because it's very much the same in the sense of like the getting stuck piece, right? Like in what we're saying about consuming other content, it comes down to the fact that it is so easy to go online and get confused. And I will say as a bright spot, so that we can kind of give people like the hope piece of this, something that was really cool that I think it would be a great thing for you to react to was you mentioned earlier that like, there's kind of like that attention is currency. And there's like a group of people that like, if you don't think the same way as them, you then, like you said, look like a hater or you're criticizing or something like that. Totally agree. But what I will say is for all the people who are, for example, like talking about how like there's two camps for AI. There's a camp that's like, oh my God, this is scary. And like, this is not going to be a good thing. And there's another camp like, this is great. It's going to streamline things. It's going to help us work faster. I say that I can kind of be in the middle because I think there's like scenarios where it works and scenarios where I have concerns about it. But one thing that is a huge bright spot is as an exercise on that podcast episode, I typed into ChatGPT, it's 6 weeks until summer. What are other nutrition coaches saying on the internet if I were to want to tighten up and lose anywhere from 5 to 10 pounds before Memorial Day? What should I be focusing on? The most amazing thing about it, I got 3 really high quality answers. Walking and getting your steps, focusing on resistance training, and eating more protein. And I was like, fuck yeah. Like I agree with all of those things. Where I think it's great is the fact that like, that's such good news because if you went into Google, that's not the first 3 things that are coming up. But where I think this is a bias is I did choose the language. What are nutrition coaches saying? And I'm sure if I said influencers, because I went on and I'm not going to recap the whole episode, but like I went on to basically say that like I continued to have a conversation with ChatGPT because I said, this is interesting that you're telling me that these are the top 3 tips, because I would argue that all I see is fad diets and other things. So where do you think that's coming from? And ChatGPT basically said that is a good point. And the thing we have to remember is that there will always be celebrities and influencers who are pushing products and other fad diets. But overall, it did say this statement. And I thought this was such like an uplifting piece of information to hear. The general consensus that ChatGPT is pulling from its algorithm is that there is a trend via social media that more people are aware and putting an emphasis on foundational habits. And I was like, that's great news. And that's where I get to say like, cool, this is a positive, this is a bright spot. But then I also have the caution of like, just because ChatGPT is telling you this, it's not going to replace a nutrition coach because now you got to go do the thing and you need the accountability.
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts on all that stuff. I think that first, if we're talking about, looking at things from a different perspective and like trying to shift your mindset or take more authority over your life, I think is a good kind of theme.
Hell yeah.
I just feel like if I took the average person and like just gun to your head, what do you got to do today if you want to be healthier? You could give me you'd give me right answers.
Yeah, I think people are smart. Like I think we also part of the problem, like not to cut you off, but I think like part of the problem is like some of the bullshit stuff we were highlighting before is like there are creators out there who are still treating people as if we're stupid and we're not. Like you're saying, it's like gun to your head. Like most people do know that like restricting carbohydrates is not a long-term solution. Like they know that, like, but there's fear, there's safety, there's a lot of other psychological principles that's causing someone to choose that option. The mentality of wanting fast results, the society that we live in, that's instant gratification, and on and on and on.
I think you're 100% right. I think there's a fear, there's a lack of trust in your own beliefs and your own instincts that people
Right. Like
have.
you're saying.
Yeah, but I think that what happens for all of us is just that your your life is now either you're on one side of the fence where you're just 100% a consumer, which no one really is because
Yeah.
everyone's kind of got
No.
like, their own business, whatever. But if let's say you're 100% a consumer, you're now just like, I have a problem that I want to fix. And it doesn't have to be a major problem. It could just be a small
Hmm.
problem. You you just gotta like go into the ocean of the internet and you can
Yeah.
find and find stuff. And that's good because there's more access to information. But the negative is on the other side of it, there's consumers on one side, and the other side is there's people trying to sell you something. And I think the
Hmm.
entire internet is 90% people trying to sell you something. And
Yeah.
when people are trying to sell you something and they're all getting their messaging from this very strict idea that in order to get people to buy from you, what do you have to do? Well, you have to speak in like an 8-year-old's grammar because that way you can attract more people. You have to hit on quote unquote pain points. So again, when you have a lot of people taking this information, they're gonna go, okay, I gotta figure out how to hit on pain points. But they're not figuring it out like in their office, writing ideas down. They're testing in quotes
Yep.
on social media. But when you test on social media, you're putting information out there to people who are trusting you that you have the right information. So now the whole cycle is people trying to sell you something who are making you feel like shit and talking to you like an 8-year-old. And you're
Yeah.
reading that 1,000 times a day. So after a while, what is you're
Sure.
now hardwired to like think like an 8-year-old who also feels like shit about themselves. So
Yeah. And it's the worst place to be.
but again, but like I was someone who comes from someplace where I was not I didn't have ingrained confidence and self-worth as a kid. So
Mm,
going into adulthood, I had no playbook. I didn't have an example what a stable adult should look like in life. So
yeah.
I just automatically, unknowingly, was giving up my authority. I always tell people that maybe this isn't politically correct, but I think I'm just like, if I was born, if I was a female, I would have had the worst dating track record. Because when I became an adult male, I was looking for a father figure. So I
Yeah.
started becoming friends with older
That's
toxic.
politically correct, by the way. That's so
Yeah, yeah.
fair. And more
But
women need to understand that.
it took me until like literally, I don't know, the last few years to realize this pattern, and I can trace it all through my late teens, early 20s. I constantly latched on to older males who
Mm.
coincidentally were all very toxic, didn't have their shit together, but that was kind of what I knew, so I
Right.
latched
From
onto
your
them
upbringing.
looking
Of
for
course.
advice. And
Sure.
I would go down that path, and then it transitioned into business coaching. But because when you're a business owner, business coaches, what do they have? Money. So
Right.
I was like, these people have money, so they must be stable.
And
And
that's
then
also important as a man because that's tapping into like the components of
self-worth,
being
provider.
caretakers. Yes, 100%.
Yeah. So then I started doing that with business coaching, and I would hire business coaches who were males who I thought could lead me, and it was again pattern of, oh, this person has a lot of money, but
Mhm.
they are torpedoed their marriage or they're doing
Right.
coke and like all this shit that I don't
Yeah.
do, not align with my values. And I think
Good
people do
point.
that on the fitness side too,
Oh, yeah.
where it's like, oh, that person is in good shape. It doesn't matter. I made a post a long time ago that was like, don't follow the diet from the woman or like the woman in your neighborhood who's going through a divorce and barely sees her kids, who's competing in a figure competition is not the person you should be taking advice from.
No,
Like,
because do you want anything else about her life? Like
no.
that is such a good point. And like then that also plays into everything you were saying about like the information piece of this too, because people only show you what they want to show you on social media. So
Yep.
you don't get the full context of like what if that woman's not sharing that she's going through those
They
things
they don't.
because
They
they
always
don't.
do it like in this vague way where it's like
Yeah.
they'll
No
post a meme
transparency.
of a flower growing out of concrete and that's
Ah,
supposed to be inspirational, but it's like, oh, but you cheated on your husband, so like I don't know where this is going. So
yeah.
it's just a weird place, and I know we had talked about before we started recording like how I'd gotten into a really bad car accident about a month and
Yes.
a half ago, and I would love to tell you that I got into this car accident and my perspective on life shifted immediately and it led to like this awakening and then like my business flourished and my meaning of life flourished. And that could be a very compelling message in quotes that I could
Yeah.
put on social media and then attract people. But the truth is, it's not that smooth. Like getting into a car accident sucked. I almost died. I had to take my daughter's car seat out of my car and had the thought of like, oh my God, she could have been in the car with me
Yeah.
when this
That's
happened.
chilling.
I
That's
then
so
had,
chilling.
yeah, then had to buy a new car, which was also a trigger because I didn't have a car payment because my car was paid off. So I have a new car
Yeah.
payment, had to plunk down
Right.
a down payment. Also doing this at a time when like we were talking about before, like business is kind of at a plateau, trying to figure that out. And as a provider, dude, I went from like sad, hurt, super motivated, super clear on my life, started pursuing a new meaning, didn't really quite land right away and didn't start bringing in new business. So then went
Hmm.
immediately into super anxious, slightly depressed, like feeling like I had to just go back to doing the things that I hated if I was ever going to make a living. And like all this in a month and a half to come out on the other end and be like, I have spent so much time in my adult life never thinking about what I actually enjoy doing, just thinking about what I should be doing. And
Hmm.
that is where I think most people hit a roadblock, whether it's in business, in relationships, in fitness, in nutrition. They never thought about what they actually enjoy or what they want their life to actually look like. They think about what should I be doing? So
I,
then they
yeah.
what should I be doing? So when it comes to food, I talk about this to my clients all the time. I'm like, don't ask me how you should track food when you're eating out. Do you want to track food when you're eating out? No. Do you want to be eating out 5 nights a week? Also, no. So, like, what do you actually want? And when you get to the core of it, people are like, yeah, I would love to be cooking meals at home, not tracking food all the time. And I would love to just go out to eat once or twice a week and just enjoy it. Guess what? That's how I live
Let's
my
do
life,
it.
and I'm in good
Right.
shape, right? So,
And then
like,
you become the coach to help them do that. And then you're
yeah.
actually a better coach because it's like you're the better coach. And I think you made this really apparent in the first podcast we did together too, is like thinking about asking these questions in a way that's going to get us to there. Because to your point of the fact that people are living off of these shoulds. I did a whole
Mhm.
podcast about that last year of like, can we replace the word should and need and have to with I want to? And that's
Mhm.
not coming from a place of saying that everything is butterflies and sunshines and rainbows all the time. I want to be clear, and I know that you resonate with that
Yeah,
aspect of
yeah.
this too, but it is coming from a place with fitness and nutrition that like there is this way that I'll even caution this for like my own language to think about going forward. We use these words with social media like blueprint, playbook, like the exact
Mhm.
structure. And like, I almost think if we're sending this subconscious message that's doing people a disservice to then bring it back to what you were saying before of like outsourcing your ideas and authority because you're then expecting coaches to give you the exact answer. Like you're saying, like, I'm going to take that away right now. And like, I'll have clients tomorrow who are like, I'm going out to eat this weekend. What should I do? And I'll give them the type A girly that they are, wanting the exact response of like, here's how to do it. But I also always try to bring it back to the fact, like, why are you here? Like, what do you want? I love it when some of my clients tell me that like they came into our program thinking that tracking their food would just be a temporary decision. And so many of them leave being like, I don't see a reason to quote unquote eat intuitively because I actually really like tracking my food.
Yeah.
All the power to you, sister. Cool.
Yeah. So I'll be honest with you. Like, I think you have to know what you want in terms of your overall results, and you have
100%.
to then know what trade-offs you need to
Yep.
make. Because
Calculated sacrifice, I like to call it.
but I don't think that people ever, and I've had to have this conversation a lot with myself, is
Mm-hmm.
when you lose sight of that, you have to really be willing to acknowledge what you're willing to sacrifice. And most people are only willing to make sacrifices if the result means more money, more status, more achievement, or a better body. So they're
Mm.
like, I'll do 75 hard if it means I'm gonna get a six pack. I'll not see my kids, or I'll delay, like settling down and being happy if it means my career is going to skyrocket. I'll delay taking care of my health if it means I'm going to make more money. Like there's a lot of sacrifices people are willing to make when the reward is something that is very very valued by society. But
Yeah,
there's a
that's a really
lot
good
of
point.
but there's a lot of shit, and not to put, I'm not saying this in like, oh, I know the answer, I've had the way,
No, no,
but
no.
like
Yeah.
there's shit that me and my wife really value that's required sacrifices that I don't necessarily think most people would be
Are
willing to
willing to
make.
make. Yeah.
And some of those sacrifices are making less money.
Yeah. You
And
mentioned that to me when talking about like time freedom is like a really
yeah,
big value of yours right now. Like, and I think you do such a good job of talking about this in your, like, even on your stories and things too. Like I've like the thing that pops to mind that I think would be a good share here for the listener from both like a coach perspective, but also the food and nutrition perspective. You and your son have like your ritual of getting bagels. Was it every Friday that you guys do
every
that?
Thursday
Thursday?
morning. Yeah.
Yeah, so you go and get your bagels. I love that you guys do that together. And there's two elements to that. There's the nutrition piece of like, yeah, we're having the bagel, like do the carbs, right? But there's also the piece of like, that's something that the two of you do together. And I know you value that. You value the flexibility to be able to be like, I don't have to rush out the door, put on a tie, have the 8 a.m. commute that I need to be sitting at my desk. That's not even an option for me and my son. And sure, could we make the argument that that could come with less money? Yeah. And I think to go back to what you were saying before about like being sold to and like certain sacrifices and things, there's somebody out there who's going to try to spin the whole thing of what I just said to tell you, hey, you can do that and make more money at the same
Yep.
time. And it's like, you can, but wait a second. Like, what about the moments in between where there's the plateau, where there's the struggle, where there's like, you know what? I don't care that I didn't close that next client because I'm really happy that I
Or
get to be with my son this morning.
But here's the shit that no one wants to talk about because it's you
Yeah.
can't put it into an Instagram post or a 90-second reel. Is that
Mhm.
it's not like that.
It's not.
No, like I am simultaneously grateful that I'm able to do that while also being upset that I didn't close that deal.
Right. Like two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
Like,
So like
but
I
they're
can't
trying to
just
tell you, oh, we're going to get you to like the next level all the
yeah.
time. Yeah.
But yeah, but I think that most people when they go into nutrition or fitness or business, whatever, they're expecting that the trade-offs are gonna be like
Happy.
or not happy, but just even. Like, oh,
Sure.
I
Yeah.
do this, I get this. But what they
Yeah. Good
don't
point.
tell you is that like there are mornings where I do go get paid. There's mornings where I'm sitting at the breakfast table with my two beautiful kids and my wife who I'm in love with, and my anxiety is coming out the top of my head
I'm
because
sure.
I'm worried about how many calls do I book this week or that,
Mhm.
right? And there's times where in those moments I'm not catching that thought pattern and it does go
Yeah.
off the rails and I'm not being present. And that happens
Yeah.
honestly
A
too
lot.
many times. So, but I think a lot of people, what they want to hear is that like I have the answer to fix that so you can be present.
Mhm.
But the truth is,
Yeah.
I have a whole playbook on this in quotes
Yeah.
that I just wrote. But like, you have to be able to learn how to catch your thought patterns. And when
Mhm.
people think about habits, they usually think about choices they're making throughout the day. They're not necessarily thinking about how their
It's like
mind works.
switches. Yeah.
Yeah, so like you have to be able to catch those thought patterns and try to stop them before they turn into like a forest fire.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
think a lot of times what happens is it's just much easier to sit in your car and watch the forest fire than it is to put out the
Mhm.
forest fire. So sometimes their mind spirals and it's way too much effort to stop the spiral. So
Sure.
you just end up just sitting there and your life becomes I'm just waiting for the forest to burn down. And
No, I think that's so true. Like, and I also think too, like we're totally saying the same thing, and you just said it way better than me with like the example of like the in between and like the duality of all that, right? Whereas, like, I was saying, like, the problem is that somebody's going to try to paint this picture for you of like, hey,
oh
like,
yeah.
you don't have to worry about that because eventually, in X amount of time, in 90 days, I'm going to get you to here. And it's annoying because, like, you and I both said before we hit record, like, that's not true. Like that's not
It's not.
and like we're not saying that out of complaint. It's just like let's be honest about like
Yeah.
what really goes into this. Like so many people say to me like how are you running two businesses? I'm gonna be super fucking honest with you guys. I am on my computer sometimes until midnight. And like if you don't want to do that, that's okay. I'm not asking for a medal. I want to do this. And I'm willing to then recognize that, like, I also say no to certain social events because right now I'm in a phase where, like, I'm focused on that. I'm also, like, energetically in a place where would I love, like, to be focusing on my dating life a little more? Sure. But, like, I just don't feel a ton of capacity for that right now. And that's okay. Like, I'm so okay with that because I'm really lit up by this other thing. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that I don't have nights where I'm eating dinner by myself. And I'm like, it would be really nice to share this with somebody. Like, it still crosses my mind.
That's really cool of you to admit that, because I think the narrative that would be easier to sell is that, like, oh, I don't care, I never have those moments. But there's moments where, like, there's moments like today where I might, like, my wife is starting her own business right now with her friend, and she has to go. She's doing this. It's actually a really good business idea, and it's gonna be postpartum meals for moms who just had babies.
I love it.
It's going to be amazing, but it's in the very beginning phases. Her and her friend right now are cooking recipes in her friend's kitchen, testing things out with 4 kids there, because our friend has 2
Props
kids.
To them.
And then I'm also now not going to see my kids till probably 4 p.m. So I'm going to miss them all day. But I'm also then, like, on the days sometimes when I can see them more, I'm getting anxious that I'm not doing enough for my job.
Yeah. And I appreciate you being really candid about that, because I think, like, for all the parents out there, and this is why I loved the first episode we did together too, is, like, so many parents out there, because, sorry, I'm going to throw all these, like, fashion bloggers under the bus. Like, they're looking at these women who have, like, 500,000 followers, and, like, they look like they have this perfect life, and they look like they're always there with their kids, where, like, my mom and I just had this conversation the other day. Like, some of these people who are, like, constantly posting content, you have to wonder, like, are they constantly on their phones in front of their children, not being present? Do they? And that doesn't make them a bad person. Like, I'm not saying this as, like, a bad person, but it's like, it's just like, hey, like, there are things that are going to have to happen to get to the place of, like, what you're also seeing on the other side of, like, what they're portraying online. But I think you're right. Like, we owe people more of a service to say that, like, hey, it's not like you can sit there and try to justify that, like, okay, well, like, this trade-off is because of this and I'll be okay with that. But I actually heard on a podcast yesterday where the people were talking about dating, and the host, it was like 2 co-hosts who are, one's engaged and the other one's just, like, on a dating journey. And she was saying how, like, her therapist mentioned to her something that's really important to consider is the more you tell yourself, like, the business example, because she had kind of the same story that I just did. Like, the last year has been great for her business, and she's been really focused on that she kind of felt like she didn't have capacity in her dating life. But this is where that gets a little bit dicey, because she said she started telling herself, aka the thought patterns that you just mentioned that we want to observe and potentially interrupt, that it is okay if I then don't get these things that truthfully she really wants. And, like, she's convinced herself of this story. Like, in this woman's case, she doesn't want children. So in her mind, she's told herself for the last couple of years, it doesn't matter that I'm almost 40 and I don't have a partner, because my clock's not ticking in that, like, regard. And she realized that was actually really harmful that she was doing that to herself, because she's, like, not allowing herself to want the thing she actually wants. Like, she's trying to convince herself, oh, well, I'll just be happy because I have a great business. I love my podcast and I can provide for myself. So I don't need a man. And it's like, sorry, but, like, biologically, she's also allowed to want partnership, and even if she doesn't want kids, right? Like, there's still a want for those things, and she's allowed to have both of those things to be true. And I just appreciated the fact that her therapist highlighted that for her, because it is, I use the word dangerous, because I've caught myself in that trap too, of, like I just said, like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend. Like, I did a post on this last week and moved out of my old apartment. And it just kind of gave me that, like, reflection of, like, wow, like, I'm almost 31, 22-year-old me thought, because of the societal pressures and the shoulda, woulda, couldas, that by now I would have 1 kid, maybe even considering having a second one. I would have been married for 4 years had I made different decisions. And for as much as I sat there and, like, made this post that said, like, I'm so proud of myself that I've also been able to share this journey with people and say that it's okay to remove yourself from the societal norms. It also isn't me like declaring with like you said, like digging your heels into the sand that like I don't want that for myself. I've let go of like expectation of timelines, but I'm not letting go of the desire to also want that thing too. And that's why I love everything you're saying about like the thoughts in your mind and being able to observe them, because that's what presence is actually about, right? Like if we really boil it all down, what you're saying about those feelings of anxiety, the feelings of those pressures is like, yeah, you might be sitting there with your kids, but like there's that urge to be like, I really got to check my phone because like I saw my notifications from Everfit go off like 3 times. And to bring it all back together, I actually had this conversation with my assistant nutrition coach yesterday, and we were talking about the fact that like a lot of the anxieties that we have can be solved through more openness and more communication. Example being that we were trying to put together like a schedule to where we can just communicate to the Fitness Fix clients, hey, these are the office hours on Tuesdays. If you want to message us on Everfit between like 4 and 7 p.m., in that window, you can expect a more immediate response versus we would like be like, oh my God, like we have to be the best nutrition coaches who like are always available to our clients. And it's just like, that's not that realistic.
Yeah, honestly, like I work with a lot of women who are very successful, very hard workers, very in business.
We
And I
had
told
that in common with our typical client.
and I told this one client of mine, and she's doing great. But when I first started with her, she's a partner in her own like her own business, and it's very busy. She works with a lot of like very powerful like high end clients and things like that.
Okay.
So she would have days where she would have like 12 meetings in a 7 hour span. And she was
no
trying
breaks,
to work
no
out.
Lunch. Yeah.
Yeah. And I told her, and I told her, I said, what you want in those moments is, and it's okay to want this. I said, but you want someone in that meeting to stand up, put their hand on your shoulder, and be like, hey, I won't use her name, but hey, and address her by name. And I think I made you a plate. I think you should come eat some lunch. I
Yep.
said,
Didn't you do a story about this?
was that?
Didn't you put this on your stories?
I don't know if I said
like-
that. I definitely said it somewhere else. It might have been on a podcast or something.
I loved it. Maybe it was when we did that live.
It might have been on the live. Yeah. So like,
it was
but
so
I've said
good.
that several times. And so what happens is that we talked about like the feminine and the masculine earlier. You kind of briefly mentioned it. And that's one thing that me and my wife have really worked on is
that's awesome.
Not to give you a whole spiel, but I think this story could be helpful. I know my wife says I'm an oversharer, but my wife turned 30 when we met.
Okay.
And she had just got out of a long-term of a marriage. And that we met while she was on the, like, when all of that was coming to a head and nothing was going good. That's when we met. And I had just come off of of getting dumped out of a really long-term relationship. Both of us were not in a situation where we were looking for a relationship. But we ended up connecting and stuff. She's always been a very strong, independent, hardworking woman. So that was her story. And I was a very insecure, but her words, insecure, but didn't come off that way, and came off as kind of like a dick.
I love you guys. I want to come and hang out with you.
Oh yeah, we're awesome. But like, so she was like, this guy's kind of a dick, but again, her words, not mine, but he's kind of hot, so I'll talk to him. That's how we started. That's how we started. That's how we met.
She's my kind of girl.
Then we found out that like I was actually very, very insecure and passive, and she was very strong-willed and independent, and it threw off our dynamic.
Yeah, totally.
And she's not like masculine in the typical like butch, like she's gorgeous and like very girly, but she just had more of a masculine energy because she wasn't used to being taken care of. Once I proved that I could take care of her and stepped into that, it allowed her to step back and start being a little more feminine. And now she was able to, she stopped, she was teaching full time. She doesn't teach anymore. And I took on the role of the full-time income provider. But then that brought up all this trauma and triggers for me of feeling not good enough to take that on. And I started to then that's what led to my spirals of anxiety and stuff like that. Was like I was taking on this role that I never saw before. I never saw this work out well. in my life, and she
Good
never
point.
saw a woman give up her power and that work out well. So we're
Yeah.
both battling. And guess what that required?
Rewriting all of those stories.
But very open communication and being very vulnerable with each other. And now I feel like we're in like such a good spot with that.
That's awesome.
And but again, she started over at 30
Yeah.
and didn't know that she was gonna meet me and that she was gonna end up having two kids and she just was like, I gotta get out of my situation and start over, no plan.
Yeah.
And
I need
like
her to come
that,
on the podcast now that I
oh
know this because we got a
yeah,
lot to talk about.
she's amazing, but like she's not the type of person who will go on social media and post that shit
Yeah.
because she's like that's just weird to me to post it.
Mhm.
But anyway, my point is that like I think all of us and I don't, and again, I think people get offended when I say this. I'm not saying this in an offensive way. I think a lot of women, it doesn't mean that you have to be passive and a homemaker, but I think a
No.
lot of women want to know that they can be strong and independent, but they don't have to be if they didn't want
Yeah.
to.
You're
And I
preaching
think
to the choir.
there's
I
a lot,
totally agree.
yeah, but I think sometimes though, if you push yourself too far in that direction,
Mhm.
then it gets harder and harder to at least come back to baseline, come back to center. And
Oh,
and and
100%
and,
with
and
anything.
yeah, so there's a lot of men who if you were like, dude, listen, you think you're being a fucking provider, but really, like, you're gone all the time. You're not being present with your kids, and your wife is doing the laundry, cooking, taking care of the kids all day. You're coming home at 6 p.m. and just putting them to bed, and you're calling it a day.
Mhm.
That's not masculine.
No.
Masculine is being like, I'll provide for you, and when I see you got too much on your plate, I want to be around with the kids. I want to be have a relationship with them. And on the flip side, I think for women, it's like sometimes it's like you can get so strong-willed and so independent that like if someone tries to disrupt that, it's a massive leap of faith and trust.
Huge. And like I've been in
Yeah.
dynamics, like I said, you're preaching to the choir because like over the last year in working with another coach around self-development and things I've shared with you, like something that was really helpful for me was for me to understand like why I was attracting certain relationships in my life. And like I've talked about this very openly, overshare as well. I look back on what would have been my marriage and it makes perfect sense. Like one, why it didn't work out makes perfect sense. Like hindsight is 2020. It has a lot to do with what you just described. And like coupled with the fact that I was 25 and he was almost 27 and we were not using the open communication skills to
Oh yeah.
unpack that and figure it out because we didn't have them. And I will say no shade to him. I was pursuing developing those skills without him because I started going to therapy. I started doing these things and I could not figure out a way to express that I felt like kind of anxious being in that masculine state of like,
Yeah.
I'm feeling this pressure. I quit my job. And truthfully, I had no confidence that he was going to be able to like have our back as a team. And that really led to the unraveling of the relationship. But it's now taken the last 5 years to kind of say to myself, all right, I know that by being an entrepreneur, I'm going to naturally operate in a more masculine, energetic state because of like, you got to get shit done to take action and run your business. And I have since been in situations in dating that's made me realize, like, okay, how is this coming across in a way that's allowed me to think about like what I really like intrinsically know what I'm looking for in a partner and also trust that I can feel because I now know like how does that then look? The dynamic is that I'm looking for the person who will give me the space to soften into more of that feminine and is saying, "Hey, like I'm going to cheer you on if you want to continue to go build this business, but also build it in a way that's like it's not out of like I have to take care of myself as a strong, independent woman, but more out of a place of like, I like this. I enjoy this. I'm in my creative flow. I'm in this energy that then, by the way, that's also the state that's going to allow you to be more successful because it's
Yeah.
not coming from this like, oh my God, desperation. This kind of has to happen thing. And that's where, like you're saying, like the balance of these dynamics come in. And it's not to say that the man is always in the masculine and the female is always in the feminine. It's this state of like the like yin and yang of all of it. And that's why it seems to really work for you guys, which I love hearing. And I appreciate you
But
sharing.
we've been together now for 8 years
And
and
how
we've
long did
been
it take you to
married.
get to this?
Married. We've been
Tell the
together 8
people.
years. Yeah, we've been together for 8 years, almost 8 years.
Okay.
Actually, wait, hold on. No, almost 9 years. Eight,
Okay.
like a little over 8 years. We've been married since 2019, so coming up
Okay.
on 6 years.
Yeah.
I would say, we had our son in 2020. I would say, a, one thing I will say is that one thing that can really be telling is like during 2020 when everything was shut down,
Yeah.
we were awesome. We missed that. Like I think sometimes that like unravels relationships. We were like, oh, when we don't have distractions, this is so much better because like
Yeah. That's
we're like
awesome.
we're great together. But anyway, we're still doing the work now. So
Yeah.
it's not
It's
like
constant.
we're not like there in terms of
No.
like where it's there. Like even after the car accident too, just me being like all the shit I was kind of emotionally unloading on her, and she was allowing me the space to do that, but then
Mm.
wasn't feeling like she could then say how it was making her feel. And then we had to
Mm.
talk about that, and I was like realizing like, oh yeah, like this person is literally trusting you and depending on you, and you're unloading
Yeah.
all of your shit. Like you should be able to unload your shit, but you have to also be a man and be like, when does the shit actually need to be unloaded, and when is it just like, okay, listen,
Fair.
this is something I got to figure out first. So one thing I will give advice to a guy who is maybe going to pursue a relationship with someone like that is you have to, like, you can't be a fucking dude. Like,
I
don't be
know
a
exactly what
fucking
you mean.
dude where it's like you're like there, but you're not there, and then like, and I've been there before. It was like my ego would get
Yeah.
hurt so easily, and my thing is
Yeah.
I don't yell. I'm not a yeller. I don't get stern. I never am like any. I'm never aggressive towards a female. I shut down though. So I would shut down, and then it would take forever to get me to open back up. And anyway,
Mm.
so says to the two dudes who are like pursuing that, is you have to like realize that this is gonna be a hard shell to crack, and you have to be sure that that's the person you want to put in that work for, because with my wife, like I'll tell her all the time, like you were a tough shell to crack. Like to get her to be completely vulnerable and open up, like it was
Yeah.
a tough shell to crack. But I just was so like about her that like I was just, it was never a question of like, oh, should I do this or shouldn't I, like it was just like, oh, I just know that like this is the path I'm on. And it was never
Mm.
like like, oh, should I, shouldn't I. There was definitely times where it's tough, you have to have tough conversations, but if you're a guy and like you're looking stepping into your masculinity doesn't mean like bossing your girl around or like making
No.
every decision. What it means is that like you have the confidence to take criticism from them and not let your ego get butthurt, but also be able to make decisions and give them the space to figure that stuff out. Like my
Mm.
wife never would have stopped teaching if she didn't think I had my shit together. But
Right.
like the reason why we did is because we like our core value is like we don't want other people raising our kids.
Okay.
And if that means that we have to work less and make less money and budget, we're willing to do that because
To
we
do it.
know
Yeah.
so deeply that that's what's best for our
Important to
kids.
you.
But
Yeah.
it's hard to do that when sometimes you've built your own golden prison and now you're
Mm.
like, I've got 20 employees in this multi-million dollar business. How do you scale back from that to like, oh, I'm going to raise my babies? So
Yeah.
sometimes, again, it's sacrifices that people aren't willing to make. But I would say, like, again, not that I'm a dating expert by any means, but like my experience in that sort of dynamic where you have that masculine feminine energy that's kind of maybe not where you want it to be, the solution is not, I mean, unless it's like really bad and you're just not compatible. But like, if you're the guy in that situation, I think most guys, what happens is they're not getting the validation, then they go fucking seek it somewhere
Hmm.
else. And
Sure. For sure.
and I think, or with girls, it might be like, oh, this guy's a wimp, so I'm gonna go find a more masculine guy. And
Hmm.
sometimes if you just commit to like we're gonna do this work again, assuming that you're right for each other, I
Right.
just think that
Other
like
factors. Yeah.
yeah. Sometimes it's like it's really like making the effort
Together.
together. You can't have one person making all the effort.
No,
Definitely
you
not.
can't. You absolutely can't. I love
Yeah.
that. And I think you could. I know you're joking. You're not a dating expert, but the more you were talking about the masculine and feminine, I'm like, does Adam
I'm
need to
definitely
add another
not.
layer to his business that coaches
I'm not a dating expert, but I think I am good at
relationship? Yeah.
Yeah, because
And the
because
cool thing is everything's relationship when you really think about it.
I also
Everything in
too
life.
like I wasn't someone who like dated around a lot. Like I don't have like a lot
Okay.
of girlfriends in the past. So like I'm
Yeah.
definitely not a dating expert.
You're
But
not
I
like
got
teaching the art of the pickup.
like yeah, because like literally like I think I've had two long-term relationships and my wife is one of
Wow.
them. So like
Okay.
I've dated in between a little bit, but never like, oh, I dated someone for 3 months, that I dated someone for 4 months. It was like
Yeah. Yeah.
long term, little bit of a break, date around a little bit, and then right into long term again. So I think I'm just like a relationship guy. I like that I like that safe place to
Stability.
come back to.
Mm.
I also probably just don't have the bandwidth to date because I'm always so emotionally available to like clients than like
Sure. I
than
think that's
I
what
do
I
of
was
going
like
on like a
getting at
date.
before. I think that's
Yeah.
so valid. Like I think that's like why I think the way that I do in the season that I'm in 100%. Cause like
Mhm.
there is that aspect of all of it with like the empathetic component and everything too. So I validate that times 100 as somebody who's like still in that phase of life for sure. So I know we have to run because I know you got a busy day of client check-ins and you have another podcast to go record too. And I
Yes.
appreciate you. I think this warrants a part 3 for sure.
I was
So
literally gonna say like
yeah,
I want to be the first third
you're
guest.
in.
I
Don't
want the
I won't let
the third
anybody
invite.
pass you. You're in.
Okay,
You're
good.
you're you're in for a part 3. So I really appreciate you always making the time for great conversations, great perspectives. And one thing I just want to acknowledge you for is the fact that like you even asked the question midway through the recording of like who's kind of like the audience here. And what I think, like I said, is so amazing about this, I don't believe in the statement of like how you do one thing is how you do everything,
Mhm.
but I do believe in the statement that there are just so many parallels. Like I love being known by other friends as like the queen of analogies. And I think
Mhm.
you're great at that as well, because like the way you think about fitness and nutrition and relationships, like it all does connect in some kind of way because it comes back to your core beliefs and your core values and your thoughts and those thought patterns then influencing the way you see the world and the way you live your life. So I appreciate you and again want to acknowledge you for the fact that I love having conversations with you because I don't know where it's going to go. And to
Yeah.
me, that's like the beautiful part about podcasting and why I think people also enjoy listening to this show and the guests that we have on it. So thank you for being a part of that awesome roster and sharing all the knowledge that you do, because that's what keeps it interesting to me. That's what keeps it fun. And I also think that's why people want the real advice and they want to cut through the bullshit like we talked about at the top of this and really want to come to a place that's like, oh, I didn't think about it like that. Let me kind of like chew on that a little bit more. And you do such a great job of doing that. So thank you for sharing that wisdom. And thank you for being the oversharer that you are, because you can tell your wife I said that that's the benefit that I see to it.
Yeah, I think sometimes definitely being married to me is very exhausting. But the cool I think speaking of duality too is like I think you have to be willing to have these deep conversations, but again, don't get lost in the messaging too. Like you also have to
Yeah,
be just like a real person and enjoy your life.
it
Like
can be light.
me and my wife can sit there and we can have these deep, vulnerable conversations where we're tackling childhood trauma and
Yeah,
we're like because she's into this stuff too. So we can have these but
I love that.
we can also literally get drunk and watch Love is Blind for 4 hours straight and
Right.
have a great
Sometimes
time.
it's that deep and
Yeah.
sometimes it's not that deep, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
the motto to me is like knowing when it is deep and when it's not. And I think that's really awesome. And I love that you both have that aspect and that dynamic in your relationship. And it's really cool and is a good reminder in a world where, like I said before, you're giving me hope just in the sense that like as much as we said there's crazy nutrition information out there, there's also crazy relationship advice out
Oh,
there and
dude,
like
it's crazy.
lack of understanding and like sweeping generalizations about certain things. Like we could do a whole podcast about all of that.
That'll be
So
part 3.
yes, there's our part 3. We already set it up. Everybody's going to come back and listen. But Adam, because I'm just bragging about all the great perspective that you share, tell everybody, where can we connect with you? Where can we follow you? We can plug your newsletter, all the things, because I know you're on more than just Instagram.
Go to Badger Strength on Instagram. In the description, there's a link to a habit guide that goes
Awesome.
through a lot of the thought patterns that we
Love
talked
that.
about.
Great.
And also check out my podcast, Talk and Fit with Adam Badger. Those are the best
Amazing.
places to go.
Great. We'll link all that down in the show notes. Well, Adam, thank you as always. Appreciate you coming on once again. Can't wait for part 3. And for everybody who tuned in today, you guys know the deal. You know the drill. Share the episode. Make sure you're following us. That actually matters more, I recently learned, than like leaving reviews on episodes. Little pro tip, podcaster to podcaster, Adam, getting people to actually follow and subscribe to your podcast on whatever channel helps the algorithms and powers that be. So we know that you guys are listening, but make sure you're following too. We appreciate you for coming back every single week. And from wherever you're listening from, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will catch you next week. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Krista.